Welcome to Learn This Game, where you can learn about board, card, and dice games and how they are played. Today, we'll be looking at Long Range Desert Group. In this video, there will be an overview and description of the game. We'll inventory the components and we'll review the rulebook. We'll go through gameplay, including setup, sample turns, and victory conditions. We'll conclude with some final comments and analysis to provide some further insight and recommendations. In the description, there'll be some helpful links and a timestamp index so you can navigate directly to any part of the presentation. Long Range Desert Group is published by Decision Games and was designed by Joseph Miranda. In this solitaire game, you'll be leading British commandos on daring missions against the Axis forces in North Africa during World War II. Long Range Desert Group comes in a relatively small package, standing only 9 inches high and 6 inches wide. It also comes in a plastic bag, so it lies relatively flat. Long Range Desert Group was first published in September of 2016. The publisher link will be in the description if you want to keep up with the printing schedule. There is no app required, and there is no app assistance available. Long Range Desert Group can be played in a relatively small space. The map is only 17 inches wide by 11 inches long, and the components are small, consisting of mini cards and counters, and it easily fits on a regular card table. The publisher did not provide an official age recommendation, but anybody 14 and over should have no problems playing this game. The difficulty was listed as low complexity, and it should take no more than 1 hour to play each mission. This is designed for solitaire-only play, and you will be competing against the enemy forces in the form of event cards. There are no expansions to this game, but Long Range Desert Group is a part of a series of games known as the Commando Series. This is a series of solitaire games in which the player must lead covert missions into enemy territory to accomplish objectives and disrupt the enemy. Although the other games do not have the solitaire stamp on the cover, according to the descriptions on the website, they are all solitaire games. Learn This Game also has a companion video for Congo Merc. The link will be in the description. Game designer Joseph Miranda has many design credits to his name, including Zulus on the Ramparts and Empires in America. An internet search will help you locate many more games by this designer. If you enjoyed this game, you may also enjoy other games using the theme of the North Africa campaign. Field Commander Rommel is a solitaire game published by DVG. Undaunted North Africa is a 2-player card game published by Osprey Games. GMT also publishes games with this theme, such as the Battle for North Africa and the North African Front, which is part of their No Retreat series. The classic Avalon Hill game Africa Core is out of print, but you may still be able to find it on eBay, Amazon, and online game stores. To find additional similar games, you can conduct an internet search with the following keywords: World War II, Tobruk, Africa Core, Rommel, Axis, Allies, and North Africa Warfare. If you'd like to learn more about this time period in history, you may want to consider the following books: Patton's First Victory by Leo Barron, An Army at Dawn by Rick Atkinson, and Rommel's Africa Corps by George Bradford. Now that you've seen a brief description of the game, let's get into the game itself. Welcome to Long Range Desert Group. This is a solitaire, card-driven military combat game using a map, counters, and dice. Thematically, the game covers small-scale British operations against Axis forces in North Africa during World War II. The game is intended to be historically accurate. The player plays the British side only. Now let's find out how to win the game. The game is played in missions, and each mission will require you to draw one mission card such as this one. The card will state the objectives necessary to win. You will be required to do 2 things in each mission. You achieve the recover objective by capturing and moving the number of real objectives back to a friendly base. And you must inflict this number of casualties on the enemy, which is maintained on the killed in action track on the game map. If you do not accomplish both of these objectives by the end of the game, you lose. You can also play all 4 missions as a campaign. You win the campaign only when you have won all of the scenarios. If you lose any 2 missions in a row, you lose the campaign. There are 2 missions for 1941 and 2 for 1942. The year is printed on the top right of each mission card. Now let's look at the components. Long Range Desert Group comes with one 4-page rulebook which has the common rules for every game in the Commando series. It also comes with 2 pages of scenario rules specific to this game. There are 40 counters. The light brown counters represent the enemy forces at the company and battalion levels. There is also one unmounted paper map 17 inches wide by 11 inches high. 1 inch equals 75 miles on the map. There are 4 mission cards which are actually mini cards measuring a little under 1.5 inches wide by 2.5 inches high. There are also 14 event cards which control the opposition forces. They are labeled Op4 in the upper right corner. All of the cards, including the mission cards, are also numbered on the bottom right corner for inventory purposes. You will also need 6-sided dice for combat rolls and other determinations. Dice are not included in the game, but 6 are recommended. You can use physical dice or a dice rolling app which can usually be found at no cost for both Apple and Android devices. Another item needed but not included will be an opaque container where you will place the enemy counters so they can be drawn as dictated by the event cards. Now let's look at the rulebook. The main 4-page rulebook applies to all games in the Commando series. The 2-page scenario rules provide additional instructions on how to play this particular game. After reading the main rulebook, make sure to carefully read the scenario rules which have exceptions to the main rulebook. For example, there are exceptions to how you handle objectives and the killed in action counter track in Long Range Desert Group versus other games in the Commando series. Now let's set up the game so that we can start the mission. First, unfold and place the map in front of you. Next, draw a mission card and place it face up next to the map. Then, shuffle the event cards and place them face down in a pile next to the map. Next, place the light brown enemy counters into the opaque container. You will be drawing enemy forces from this container as dictated by the event cards. Finally, place the dice next to the map. The dice will be rolled to determine results for battle, placing objectives, amphibious attempts, and other checks. Now let's take a closer look at the mission card, which will show us how to finish setting up the game. For this mission, we will need to place 2 real objectives and 2 minefields at random on the map. On the back of each counter is a question mark. You will need to turn over the counters and shuffle them for randomness to conceal their identities. We will then consult the random objective location table and roll 2 dice for each counter to determine where they should be placed. So if we roll a 9 for the first counter, for example, the counter will be placed in the corresponding city, Beta Litorio. Continue rolling 2-sided dice at a time until all 4 counters are placed. If you roll duplicate numbers, keep rolling since each counter must be placed separately in a unique space. The next item on the mission card tells us where to place the Das Afrika Korps headquarters counter on the map. During the mission, British units cannot enter this space. The mission item tells us we have to uncover 1 real objective and bring it back to one of our bases. We also have to inflict a total of 4 or more net casualties on the enemy in order to win the mission. In this mission, we start with 6 operations. We place the ops counter and the KIA counter on their respective tracks on the map. Next, we are given 30 recruit points to select our commando units. We will consult the recruiting cost table to determine the costs of each unit. After we select our units, we can place them in any of the 3 British bases to start the game. Let's take a look at the unit types before we start the recruiting process. Each unit has an icon that shows the type of unit at the top. The attack power is at the bottom left of the counter, and the movement allowance per operation is on the bottom right. The basic combat units include, from left to right, the leader, a Jeep patrol, which is only available in the 1942 missions, so we cannot select one for this mission, a truck patrol, an armored car, heavy weapons, and the Royal Marines amphibious unit. Next, there is an airstrike counter and the wireless unit needed to call in the airstrikes. Next, there's the supply column and the air support units. Finally, there is a special interrogation group and then the engineers unit, known as the sappers. For this mission, we have recruited the following units. The cost of each unit is shown in red. We do not have to spend all of our recruit points at the beginning of the mission. In this mission, we have expended 25 recruit points and kept 5 in reserve in case we need to purchase additional operations or other actions. Finally, the mission card states that we can have 1 leader and that there's a stacking limit of 4. There are 2 commando leaders in the game, and you can select either leader. We need to review 2 important terms before we can begin gameplay. The first is force. A force is a group of units in the same space conducting an operation together. A force can consist of 1 or more units, and units in a force must move together, and you cannot pick up or drop off units from a force. A force moves no faster than the slowest unit in that force. The next term is stacking. Stacking is having more than 1 unit in a space. During a campaign, you can have up to 6 land units in a space. Since we are only playing 1 mission, we are limited to stacking 4 land units per the mission card. Leaders, air units, Op4 counters, and objective markers do not count towards the stacking limit. An unlimited number of units may be stacked at a base. The next step is to create our forces. We must place the airstrike counter in the air available box on the map under the ops track. Force 1 will consist of a leader, a wireless unit to call in the airstrikes, a heavy weapons unit, a truck patrol, and combat engineers, or sappers as they are referred to in the rulebook. Force 2 will consist of a heavy weapons unit, a truck patrol, and an armored car. We will place the airstrike unit in the appropriate box. We will place Force 1 in Kufra where there is an airfield and an oasis. Force 2 will be placed in Alexandria where there is an airfield and a port. We will replace the counters with the numbers 1 and 2 for ease of reference. In this video, we are going to play through an entire mission until we either win by accomplishing the objectives or lose if all of our units are killed or we run out of operations. The mission is divided into turns called operations. Only 1 force will conduct 1 operation at a time. An operation has 4 segments: movement, drawing an event card, conducting combat if necessary, and engaging an objective if encountered by the force. At the end of a turn, we will move the ops counter on the operations track. The game ends if operations are reduced to 0. The order of segments will be shown on the left side of the map for ongoing reference. There are 2 safe lines denoted by the red and white dashed lines. The red line applies to the 1941 missions and the white line applies to the 1942 missions. A force east of the safe line for the mission year ignores any event card generating enemy units. For our first operation, we are moving Force 1 from the base at Kufra 3 spaces to the next base, which has an oasis. The space west of Kufra is a sand sea. According to the terrain effects chart, we would usually have to stop in this terrain regardless of the number of moves remaining. However, because we have the sappers, or combat engineers, we can bypass this terrain restriction, and because we started in an oasis, we get to add 1 to our movement allowance of 2. After moving, We then move to the event card segment and draw an event card. We follow the instructions on the card. We roll a 3, which after being divided by 2 and rounding up, results in a 2. We then draw 2 enemy counters from the counter container. We draw enemy units with firing powers of 4 and 2. Our next combat step will be to determine tactical superiority. Tactical superiority determines which side fires first in combat. In long-range desert group, combat is not considered simultaneous, so once a unit is eliminated, it does not get a chance to return fire. So then we roll 1 die for each side. Going forward, enemy dice will be colored light brown and commando dice will be dark brown to match their corresponding counters. In this case, the enemy rolls a 5 and the commandos roll a 4. However, because the commandos have a leader, this adds 1 to the die, giving the commandos a 5. A tie goes to the commandos unless indicated otherwise on the event card, so the commandos gain tactical superiority during this initial round of combat. Now we start the first round of battle. First, line up enemy forces in line from highest to lowest firing power. If 2 units have the same firepower, the order does not matter. Next, line up your commando forces in any order you prefer. We will be consulting the battle results table found on the map. Fire will alternate between the commandos and the enemy until all units have had a chance to fire, unless they've been eliminated or panicked. Commando units can fire at any enemy unit during their turn, but the enemy units can only fire at the first commando unit in line. If one side has more units than the other after alternating fire between the opposing groups, that side then fires all of its remaining units. If both sides still have units that are not eliminated or panicked, a second round of combat begins, starting with determining tactical superiority. Since the commandos have tactical superiority, the heavy weapon unit fires at the enemy armored vehicle and can roll 5 dice based on the firepower of 5. After rolling 5 dice, the commandos score an elimination roll with a 6. Because combat is not simultaneous, the enemy unit is eliminated and cannot return fire. You can move the KIA counter up 1 on the KIA track. The enemy now gets to fire with its remaining unit. It attacks the first commando unit, but only rolls a 3 and a 1 to no effect. The commando truck patrol then fires by rolling 3 dice. The 5 result causes a panic. The enemy counter is turned over to show that it is panicked and cannot return for the duration of this combat segment. The 3 remaining commando units get to fire in turn, but for demonstration purposes, let's say they all miss. This ends the combat segment since one side does not have any active units to fire. The enemy counter is returned to the container bin, but panicked units do not count as a KIA point. Since we did not encounter any objectives, the operation ends. The event card states that we win 1 operation. Since this is the end of the turn, we would normally move the ops counter down to 5, but since we also gained an operation, we will leave it at 6. We can now start the next operation by moving the first force 3 spaces to the first objective. The normal movement allowance would be 2 spaces, but starting in the oasis gives us 1 additional movement allowance according to the terrain effects chart. Be sure to carefully read the scenario rules 38.1 and 38.2 regarding objectives and minefields, since the scenario rules differ from the main rulebook. When we enter a space with an objective, we flip over the counter before drawing an event card. If it is a minefield, no event card is drawn because the minefield becomes the event. If the counter is a real objective, draw an event card. In this case, we draw the Shifting Sands event card, which states that if the operating force has a sapper or wireless unit, we can ignore this card. Since we actually have both units, we'll go ahead and ignore the card and place the event card in the discard pile. If we have surviving units after resolving the event, we gain 1 operation and may now transport the objective back to base. If there were no surviving commandos, the objective would have been removed from the game. We must now assign the objective to a unit. If the transporting unit is destroyed in combat, the objective is also considered destroyed and removed from the game. We will assign this to the leader and make sure to place him last in any battle line to increase his chances of survival. Since it is the end of the operation, we move the ops marker to 5, but since we also gained one operation by recovering the objective, we will leave the ops marker at 6. We start the next operation by moving 2 spaces towards our base at Kufra. We draw the event card, Orders from Cairo. Since we do have a wireless unit, we have to roll 1 die. It results in a 2, which means that we lose 1 operation. We then move the ops marker to 5, and because it is the end of the turn, we move the ops marker to 4. We now have 4 operations in which to return to base to drop off the objective, and then return to the desert to attempt to inflict 3 more casualties to the enemy in order to meet our mission objectives. We then start our next operation and move 2 more spaces towards our base. We draw our first intel card, which we can keep for future use. We can play this card at the start of any operation. We then move the ops counter to 3, since it is the end of the operation. We begin the next operation by moving 2 spaces to our base. Again, we are allowed to bypass the Sand Sea space since we still have the Combat Engineers unit. Otherwise, we would have had to have stopped at the Sand Sea per the terrain effects chart. We do not draw an event card when we stop at a base. Since the operation is over, we move the ops counter to 2. We have now accomplished the recover requirement by successfully bringing back 1 real objective to one of our bases. Unfortunately, we still need to inflict 3 more casualties on the enemy before we can win the mission. Recall that we have an intel card and also 5 recruit points in reserve. Now we will spend 4 recruit points to gain 2 operations and move the marker accordingly. So now we have 4 operations available and 1 recruit point remaining. We can keep the intel card in reserve for now to determine if we will need to buy 1 more operation later or make an air or water move with force number 2. Since we have already fulfilled the real objective part of the mission, we will not need to use the first option listed on the event card. We start the next operation by moving the first force 2 spaces west of the dotted red safe line so we can look for enemy units. We can leave the objective at the base for the remainder of the mission. We draw the raid event card. Fortunately, it does initiate combat since we need to attempt to eliminate 3 more enemy units. We roll a 3 and must draw that number of enemy counters from the counter bin. We draw units with firepowers of 4, 2, and 1. We must then determine tactical superiority to determine which side fires first. The enemy rolls a 4 and the commandos only roll a 1. Even with the +1 added because a leader is present, the enemy still gains tactical superiority. Again, the enemy forces are lined up from strongest firepower to weakest, and the commandos are lined up at our discretion. The first enemy has a firepower of 4, so rolls 4 dice, resulting in the following. A 6 eliminates the commando's first unit. When a commando unit is killed, you must move the KIA counter down 1 space on the KIA track. The commando unit next in line can fire at any of the enemy units and chooses the most powerful unit, rolling 3 dice based on its firepower of 3. A 6 eliminates the unit and allows us to move the KIA marker up 1 on the KIA track. Next, the second enemy unit rolls 2 dice and attacks the next commando unit in line, but to no effect. The commando wireless unit then rolls 1 die and manages to inflict a panic result. The enemy unit is turned over and cannot fire for the entire duration of this combat segment. The remaining enemy unit then fires at the first commando unit in line, but misses with a roll of 4. Now the sappers get to roll a die at either unit and elects to fire at the one enemy unit that can still fire back if it survives this round of combat. They roll a 5, which panics the enemy. Now the leader gets to roll 1 die based on its firepower of 1. It rolls a 5, which inflicts a second panic on the enemy unit. If a unit suffers 2 panic results, it is considered KIA. So in this combat segment, we have a net result of 1 KIA since the enemy suffered 2 casualties, but the commandos also suffered 1 casualty. Again, panicked units do not count as KIA. We now move the KIA counter up 1 space. We won 2 ops because of our victory, but it is also the end of the turn. So we would move the ops counter down 1 to the 3 spot, but then up 2 spaces to the 5 spot. We then start a new operation by moving 2 more spaces. We draw the Africa Corps Offensive Event card. Since we control 1 objective, we gain 1 op, and then we have to reshuffle all discarded event cards so the event deck is full again. Since it is the end of this turn, we would move the ops counter down 1 space, but since we gained an op, we can leave the ops marker where it is on 5. We will now move 2 more spaces to look for enemy forces. We move into a space with an airfield, so if necessary, we can play our intel card and move 1 unit from Alexandria to assist in future combat. Only 1 commando unit can use an air move, and that commando unit must land in an airfield occupied by friendly units, or the destination must be a base. Luckily, we draw an event card that will produce enemy units. We roll a 4 and then divide by 2, which forces us to draw 2 enemy counters from their bin. We draw enemy units with firepowers of 3 and 1. Now we determine tactical superiority. The commandos easily win the first strike. Now we start the first round of battle. We will now call in our airstrike. The airstrike can only be used during the first round of combat and can only be applied to 1 firing unit. This airstrike unit will add 3 firepower to a unit of our choice during the first round. Recall that we need the wireless unit to call in the airstrike. The first commando unit fires at the most powerful enemy unit and easily eliminates the unit. There is a no overkill rule, so although the commando unit rolled multiple kill shots, they do not carry over to other units. The remaining enemy unit then fires at the truck patrol, but misses with a 1. We will now apply the airstrike to aid the wireless unit. Although the wireless unit is needed to call in the airstrike can be applied to any unit in the force. The airstrike adds 3 firepower to the wireless unit, allowing the wireless unit to roll 4 dice in total. The 6th result eliminates the last enemy unit. We can now move the killed in action counter to 4. Since this was our mission requirement, we can now stop since we have fulfilled both objectives of the mission card. We do not have to keep playing if we still have operations remaining. We did not get a chance to use our second force. Initially, we placed the force in Alexandria in case there was an opportunity to make an airfield or water move. It would likely have been impractical to move by land in an attempt to engage enemy forces since the safe line was so far west of Alexandria. As stated previously, forces east of the safe line disregard event cards that reveal enemy units. Here are some key things to keep in mind when making an airfield or water move. For airfield moves, only 1 commando unit, plus an optional transported objective, can move when an intel card is played. Also, the destination must be a British base or an airfield occupied by friendly forces. For water moves, the same movement rules apply as the airfield moves, but you must also roll on the amphibious insertion table to determine the outcome of the move. Fortunately, the first force was able to accomplish the objectives without the aid of the second force. So let's take a look at the mission card again to review the mission requirements. Since we recovered 1 real objective and brought it back to base, and we inflicted 4 killed in actions, we won the mission. If you play the mission as part of a campaign, consult the rulebook to determine how to proceed to the next mission. Now let's wrap up with some final comments and analysis. Overall, Long Range Desert Group is a game that is quick to learn and easy to play. It can be a good introduction to historical wargaming, and it makes a nice addition to any wargame collection since it deals with a theme that is not often used in wargaming. It is also an easy game to periodically return to for a quick and interesting gaming session. Thematically, the missions are based on historical events in North Africa during World War II between British Special Forces and the Axis powers. All of the elements are meant to be historically accurate, including commando units and the geography depicted on the map. However, the enemy units are somewhat abstracted and not very detailed. This game was designed for those interested in historical wargaming. Experienced players should find this fun and interesting, but beginning wargamers may also find this a good introduction to the genre. Aesthetically, this game has decent but rudimentary graphics and vintage World War II photos on the mission and event cards. The graphics are clear and easy to understand, and the color shading of the counters should make it easy to distinguish between commando and enemy units. The color map is simple, clear, and uncluttered, but still has the tables and charts needed for gameplay. The counter and mini cards are durable enough to stand up to many hours of gaming. Due to the low complexity, easy setup, and quick playtime, people of different ages and backgrounds can have fun with this game, and you don't have to have any experience in historical wargaming to enjoy it. The main rulebook is only 4 pages long, and the game is straightforward without requiring prior knowledge of the historical time period. There are also relatively few cards, so you should become familiar with the missions and the enemies fairly quickly. The rulebook can be a little tricky since the scenario rules will sometimes deviate from the main rulebook. There is some luck involved based on the card draw of the event deck. There is also quite a bit of luck regarding combat since dice rolls determine outcomes. However, you do have several strategic decisions to make to keep this from being merely a dice rolling luck fest. For example, you have to decide how to spend your recruit points to purchase your units. There are a surprisingly large variety of units considering the limited counters. You will have to decide which units to recruit and how to divide them into effective forces. You also have to make decisions about coordinating your forces since you are always racing against the operations track. You will also have to make decisions about air and water moves. Some of the event cards also provide choices you have to make which could affect the outcome of future actions. So even though there is a luck element, you do have to put thought into your planning, and your strategic choices do make a difference. Setup only takes a few minutes, and a game can usually be played in under 1 hour once you are familiar with the rules. Playtime will take longer, of course, if you play all 4 missions to complete a campaign. Long Range Desert Group does not require much space and can easily be played on a regular card table. The map is relatively small and the cards are mini-sized, and the charts and tables are on the map itself, so there are no player aids to take up extra space. This is strictly a solo game and not designed for multiple players. Since this is a solitaire game, there is no player interaction, although you always have the option of cursing at the event cards and dice if things aren't going your way. This is a moderately replayable game. There are only 4 mission cards and 14 event cards, so you will eventually see some repetitive play, but only after several hours of gameplay. Considering that this is a simpler introductory game, there is a surprising amount of variety when it comes to the type of commando units available. Because of the variety of commando units, you will have the opportunity to construct forces with plenty of variety. This allows for some extensive experimentation with force composition. Because of the simple rules, it is also an easy game to return to every so often to play a quick historical game. The mini-series games tend to be very inexpensive due to the limited number and small size of the components, in addition to being packaged in plastic bags instead of boxes. A low price is also maintained by requiring you to provide your own dice or dice rolling app. Products from Decision Games tend to remain in print and are easily ordered from their website. This is a small and simple game. You would get by just fine without using accessories, but here are a few ideas if you want to enhance your gaming experience. If you are playing Long Range Desert Group on a padded card table, you should be able to easily place and pick up cards. However, if you are playing on a dining room or coffee table, you may want to invest in a game mat. They are relatively inexpensive but make card play much easier. And of course, you can use the mat for other card games and games like Mahjong or Dominoes. You do have to provide your own 6-sided dice or obtain a dice rolling app, many of which are free from Google or Apple. And of course, a good dice tray could come in handy, especially in this game where you may be rolling 6 or more dice at a time. That concludes this review of Long Range Desert Group. If you lack excitement in your life but are looking for an adrenaline rush, stick around for our disclaimer. Coming up next.